The blizzard hit Muskogee, Oklahoma on the 14th of December in 1883, and Amelia Catherine stood in the boarding house kitchen watching the snow fall like judgment from heaven, her flour-dusted hands trembling as she pressed them against her generous hips, and wondered if any man would ever look past the softness of her body to see the woman beneath. She was 23 years old, and the mirror told her every morning what society whispered behind fans and gloved hands, that a woman of her size was meant to cook and clean and fade into the background, never to dance or be held or know the sweet ache of being wanted. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon and rising bread, scents that clung to Amelia's skin like a second dress, and she turned from the window to check the stove where Mrs. Henderson's dinner rolls were browning to perfection. The boarding house had been Amelia's home for 3 years now, ever since her parents died of fever and left her with nothing but a talent for baking and the crushing weight of loneliness. She earned her keep by cooking meals that made grown men weep with nostalgia for their mothers' tables. But gratitude was not the same as desire, and Amelia had learned to accept that her worth would always be measured in biscuits rather than beauty. The front door burst open with a gust of wind that sent snow swirling through the entrance hall, and Amelia heard Mrs. Henderson's startled exclamation, followed by the heavy sound of boots on wooden floors. She wiped her hands on her apron and stepped into the dining room just as a man stumbled through the doorway, his tall frame bent against the cold, his dark coat covered in white crystals that melted in the warmth of the house. "Mercy, come in. Come in before you freeze solid, Mrs. Henderson fussed, her gray curls bouncing as she bustled around the stranger. "Amelia, fetch towels and hot coffee. This poor soul looks half dead." The man straightened slowly, and Amelia felt her breath catch in her throat. He was perhaps 27 or 28, with strong features that spoke of days spent under the sun and nights sleeping under stars. His eyes were the color of aged whiskey, warm and deep, and when they landed on Amelia, they held none of the dismissal she had come to expect. He looked at her as though she were a person worthy of notice, and the unfamiliarity of it made her heart stutter. "Thank you kindly," he said, his voice rough from cold. "Name's Quinton Zimmerman. My horse threw a shoe about 2 miles back, and I've been walking through this devil of a storm trying to find shelter." "You found it," Mrs. Henderson assured him. "We have one room available, and Amelia here makes the finest meals this side of the Arkansas River. You'll want for nothing while you stay with us." Amelia ducked her head and hurried back to the kitchen, her cheeks burning despite the winter chill that had followed Quinton inside. She poured coffee into a thick ceramic mug and arranged fresh rolls on a plate, her hands moving with practiced efficiency even as her mind raced with unwelcome thoughts. He was just another boarder, she told herself firmly. Just another man passing through on his way to somewhere else, somewhere better, somewhere that did not include a too-large woman who smelled perpetually of vanilla and butter. When she returned to the dining room, Quinton had removed his coat and hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and broad shoulders that strained against his flannel shirt. He sat at the long table with his hands wrapped around the coffee mug she had brought, and he looked up when she entered with an expression of such genuine warmth that Amelia nearly dropped the plate. "That smells like heaven," he said simply. "I have not eaten since dawn." "Then eat," Amelia replied, setting the plate before him and stepping back quickly as though proximity might burn her. "There is stew as well if you want something more substantial." "I want everything you are willing to give me," Quinton said, and though his words were clearly about food, something in his tone made Amelia's pulse quicken. "This storm is not letting up. I may be here for a few days if your landlady will have me." "She will, Mrs. Henderson interjected from the hallway. Your money is as good as anyone's, Mr. Zimmerman, and we pride ourselves on hospitality. Amelia, make sure our guest has everything he needs." The next 3 days passed in a blur of snow and firelight and stolen glances that Amelia tried desperately to ignore. The storm raged outside with a fury that buried the town under drifts taller than a man, and life in the boarding house settled into a strange, suspended rhythm. The other residents, a pair of railroad workers and an elderly schoolteacher, spent their days playing cards and reading by the fire, but Quinton seemed drawn to the kitchen where Amelia worked. He would appear in the doorway with offers to carry water or chop wood, and though Amelia protested that such tasks were not necessary, he did them anyway with a quiet competence that spoke of a life lived through labor. He asked her questions as he worked, simple things at first: where she had learned to cook, how long she had lived in Muskogee, whether she liked the winter snow. Amelia answered hesitantly, unused to being the subject of anyone's curiosity, and slowly, carefully, she began to ask questions in return. Quinton was a cowboy, she learned, though he used the term loosely. He worked on a ranch about 40 miles north, driving cattle and mending fences, and doing whatever needed doing to keep the operation running. He had been on his way to visit a sick friend in Fort Smith when the storm caught him, and now he was stranded like everyone else, waiting for the weather to break. "You like it?" Amelia asked on the second evening as she rolled out pie dough, and Quinton sat at the kitchen table repairing a broken chair leg that Mrs. Henderson had been meaning to fix for months. "The ranch work, I mean." "I do," Quinton said, his hands steady as he fitted the pieces of wood together. "It is hard and honest. A man knows where he stands. The land does not lie or pretend to be something it is not." "Unlike people," Amelia murmured, more to herself than to him. Quinton looked up sharply. "Unlike some people," he corrected. "But I find that most folks are exactly what they appear to be, if you take the time to really look." Amelia felt his gaze on her like a physical touch, and she focused intently on the dough beneath her hands, rolling it thinner and thinner until it threatened to tear. "And what do you see when you look?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the wind howling outside. "I see a woman who works harder than anyone I have met," Quinton said slowly. "I see someone who makes something beautiful out of simple ingredients, who takes care of others without complaint, who moves through the world like she is apologizing for taking up space in it." He paused, and Amelia's hand stilled on the rolling pin. "I see someone who has been told lies about her worth, and I wonder who was cruel enough to make her believe them." Amelia's eyes burned with sudden tears, and she blinked them back furiously. "You do not know anything about me." "Then tell me," Quinton said. "Tell me what I am missing." "What you see is what there is," Amelia said bitterly, gesturing at herself with flour-covered hands. "I am too large, too plain, too ordinary. I am not the kind of woman men write poetry about or fight duels over. I am the kind of woman who makes their meals and mends their clothes and disappears when the pretty girls walk by. That is simply the truth of things." Quinton set down the chair leg and stood, crossing the kitchen in 3 long strides until he stood directly in front of Amelia, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes. "Who told you that?" he asked, his voice low and intense. "Who looked at you and saw anything less than remarkable?" "Everyone," Amelia whispered. "My whole life. I have always been the large girl, the one who ate too much or moved too little or simply existed wrong somehow. Men look through me, not at me. I have accepted it." "Then unaccept it," Quinton said fiercely. "Because from where I stand, you are impossible to overlook. You fill a room with warmth and the smell of cinnamon. You hum when you work, did you know that? Little songs under your breath like you carry music inside you. You have kind hands and a generous heart, and if the men in this town are too blind to see that, then they are fools not worth your time." Amelia stared at him, her heart hammering so hard she was certain he must hear it. "Why are you saying these things?" "Because they are true," Quinton said simply. "And because I think no one has ever said them to you before, and that is a crime that needs correcting." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and when she did not, he touched her cheek with fingers calloused from work but gentle in their pressure. Amelia's breath hitched, and she closed her eyes against the overwhelming sensation of being touched with tenderness, of being treated as though she were something precious rather than merely useful. "I should finish the pie," she managed to say, though she did not move away. "You should," Quinton agreed, but he did not lower his hand. "And I should let you work. But I want you to know that I see you, Amelia Catherine, all of you, and what I see makes me wish this storm would last forever." He stepped back then, leaving Amelia trembling in the middle of the kitchen with her heart in chaos and her carefully constructed walls crumbling around her feet. She finished the pie in a daze, her hands moving through familiar motions while her mind replayed every word Quinton had spoken, testing them for sincerity, searching for the joke or the pity she was certain must be hidden beneath the surface. But when she served dinner that night and Quinton smiled at her across the table with eyes that held nothing but honest warmth, Amelia felt something shift inside her chest, something that felt dangerously like hope. The storm broke on the fourth day, and with it came a rush of activity as the town dug itself out from under the snow. Quinton spent the morning helping Mrs. Henderson clear the front walk, and the afternoon retrieving his horse from the livery stable, where it had waited out the weather in relative comfort. Amelia watched from the kitchen window, her heart growing heavier with each passing hour as she realized that he would leave soon, that whatever strange connection had formed between them in the suspended reality of the blizzard would end the moment he rode away. She was kneading bread dough with more force than necessary when Quinton appeared in the kitchen doorway, his coat buttoned and his saddlebags packed. "I wanted to say goodbye properly," he said, "and to thank you for the finest meals I have had in years." "You are welcome," Amelia said, keeping her eyes on the dough. "Travel safely." "Amelia." Quinton crossed to the table and set down his bags. "Look at me, please." She did reluctantly and saw in his face an expression that mirrored the ache in her own chest. "What is it?" "Come with me," Quinton said, the words tumbling out in a rush as though he had been holding them back and could no longer contain them. "I know it is sudden. I know we have only known each other a few days, but I cannot ride away from here without asking. Come with me to the ranch. We need a cook, someone to help with the meals and manage the supplies. It is hard work but honest, and the pay is fair. You would have your own cabin, your own space, and you would be treated with respect." Amelia's hand stilled on the dough, her mind struggling to process what he was offering. "You want to hire me. I want you to have options," Quinton said carefully. "I want you to know that there is a place where your skills are valued, where you would be more than just help in a boarding house kitchen. And selfishly, I want you close by because the thought of not seeing you again makes me feel like I swallowed a stone." "You do not know me," Amelia protested weakly. 4 days in a snowstorm is not enough to make this kind of decision." "Then come for a trial period," Quinton urged. 2 weeks, 1 month, however long you need to decide if it suits you. If you hate it, I will bring you back myself and pay your wages besides. But if you do not hate it, if you find that maybe there is something worth staying for, then stay. Stay and let me prove that what I said in this kitchen was not just pretty words spoken in the moment." Amelia looked down at her hands, at the dough clinging to her fingers, at the familiar worn surface of the table where she had worked for 3 years. She thought about the safety of the known, the comfort of routine, the way she had learned to make herself small and quiet and unobtrusive. And then she thought about Quinton's eyes when he looked at her, about the way his words had wrapped around her heart like a warm blanket, about the terrifying, exhilarating possibility that maybe, just maybe, she deserved more than the life she had resigned herself to living. "I would need to speak with Mrs. Henderson," she heard herself say. "Give her proper notice. I cannot simply abandon her." Quinton's face lit up with a smile that transformed him from handsome to devastating. "Of course. However long you need. I can wait a week, 2 weeks, a month." 1 week, Amelia decided, the words coming from some brave, reckless part of herself she had not known existed. "I will give her 1 week to find someone else, and then I will come to your ranch and see if this wild idea of yours has any merit." "It has merit," Quinton promised, and he reached across the table to cover her flour-dusted hands with his own. "I swear to you, Amelia, it has all the merit in the world, Mrs. Henderson was surprisingly understanding when Amelia explained the situation that evening, her weathered face creasing into a knowing smile. "That cowboy has been watching you like you hung the moon," she said, as she helped Amelia sort through her meager belongings. "I thought he might work up the courage to say something." "You are going, then?" "Truly, I think I am," Amelia said, still half amazed by her own boldness. "Is that foolish?" "Probably," Mrs. Henderson said cheerfully, "but the best things in life usually are." "You have been hiding in my kitchen long enough, girl. Go see what the world has to offer." The week passed in a strange blur of preparation and second-guessing. Quinton returned to his ranch to make arrangements, promising to come back for Amelia on the appointed day. And in his absence, she alternated between excitement and terror. She packed her few dresses, and her mother's recipe book, and the small savings she had accumulated over the years, and she tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. The other residents of the boarding house threw her a small farewell party on her last night, and even the gruff railroad workers seemed sorry to see her go. "You make a fine biscuit," one of them said solemnly, as though this were the highest compliment he could offer. "That cowboy better treat you right, or he will answer to us." Amelia went to bed that night feeling more connected to the little boarding house than she had in all her years of living there, and she woke before dawn with her heart in her throat and her bag packed by the door. She made one last breakfast for everyone, pouring all her conflicted feelings into the food, and when Quinton arrived just after sunrise driving a sturdy wagon, she was as ready as she would ever be. The journey to the ranch took most of the day, following frozen roads through countryside that looked like something from a winter fairy tale. Quinton kept up a steady stream of conversation, pointing out landmarks and telling stories about the ranch and the people who worked there, and Amelia listened with half her attention while the other half focused on the terrifying reality of what she had agreed to do. "You are quiet," Quinton observed as they crossed a wooden bridge over a half-frozen creek. "Regretting your decision." "Not regretting," Amelia said slowly. "Just nervous. What if the others do not like me? What if I cannot do the work properly? What if this was a mistake?" "Then we figure it out," Quinton said, his hands steady on the reins. "But I do not think it will be a mistake. The ranch needs you, Amelia. We have been making do with whoever can scrape together a meal, and it shows. Men work better when they are fed well, and right now they are running on burnt beans and worse coffee. You are going to transform the place." "That is a lot of pressure," Amelia said, trying to make it sound like a joke. "You can handle it," Quinton said with complete confidence. "You can handle anything." The ranch appeared just as the winter sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, a collection of buildings clustered in a valley between low hills. The main house was larger than Amelia had expected. 2 stories of weathered wood with smoke rising from multiple chimneys. Barns and outbuildings spread out behind it, and in the distance, she could see cattle moving across the snowy fields like dark shadows against white canvas. "It is not much to look at from here," Quinton admitted as he guided the wagon down the last stretch of road. "But it is home. The main house is where the owner lives and where we take our meals. The bunkhouse is for the regular hands. And that cabin there, the one with the blue door, that is yours if you want it." Amelia looked at the small structure he indicated, noting the neat stack of firewood on the porch and the curtains visible in the single window. "It looks cozy. It is warm and dry and private," Quinton said. "That is about all I can promise, but you are welcome to make it whatever you want it to be." They pulled up in front of the main house, and immediately people began emerging from various buildings, curious about the newcomer. Amelia felt her anxiety spike as she took in the sea of unfamiliar faces, all of them male, all of them staring at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. She climbed down from the wagon on shaking legs, acutely aware of how she must look to them, how out of place she must seem. "Everyone, this is Amelia Catherine," Quinton announced, his voice carrying across the yard. "She is our new cook, and you will treat her with respect or answer to me. Understood?" There was a general murmur of agreement, and an older man with silver hair and a limp stepped forward, extending his hand. "Tom Walker, foreman," he said. "Welcome to the Broken Creek Ranch, Miss Catherine. We are glad to have you." Amelia shook his hand, grateful for the warmth in his tone. "Thank you. I hope I can live up to expectations. If you can make coffee that does not taste like mud, you will exceed them," Tom said with a wry smile. "Let me show you the kitchen, and you can decide if you want to start tonight or wait until morning." The kitchen was larger than the one at the boarding house, with a massive iron stove and sturdy tables and shelves stocked with basic supplies. It was also a disaster, with dirty dishes piled in the basin and flour spilled across every surface and a general air of neglect that made Amelia's fingers itch to start cleaning. She turned slowly, taking it all in, and felt her nervousness give way to a familiar, comfortable determination. "I will start tonight," she said firmly, "but I will need help getting this place in order first, and I will need a full inventory of what we have in the pantry and the root cellar." Tom's smile widened. "Yes, madam, I will send someone to assist you right away." The next few hours passed in a whirlwind of organization and scrubbing. 2 young ranch hands, neither of them older than 20, helped Amelia clean the kitchen while she directed them with the same efficient authority she had used at the boarding house. She took stock of the supplies, mentally planning meals that would stretch what they had while still providing proper nutrition. And by the time the sun set, she had a pot of hearty stew bubbling on the stove and fresh cornbread cooling on the counter. Quinton appeared just as she was ladling the food into serving bowls, his face tired but pleased. "It smells incredible. How are you holding up?" "I am busy," Amelia said, which was easier than admitting how right this felt, how the chaos of the kitchen had settled something restless inside her. "This place was a wreck, Quinton. How have you all been surviving?" "Poorly," he admitted. "That is why we need you." Dinner was served in the main dining hall, a long room with rough wooden tables and benches worn smooth by use. The ranch hands filed in with a noisy enthusiasm that reminded Amelia of feeding time at a stable, and she watched nervously as they dug into the meal she had prepared. The room fell silent except for the sounds of eating, and then Tom raised his coffee cup in a gesture that felt like a salute. "Miss Catherine, if you can cook like this every day, you can stay as long as you want," he declared. and the other men voiced their agreement through mouthfuls of stew and cornbread. Amelia felt her cheeks flush with pleasure, and when she glanced at Quinton, she found him watching her with an expression of quiet satisfaction. He caught her eye and nodded once as though to say, "I told you so," and despite her exhaustion, Amelia found herself smiling. She fell into bed in her new cabin that night too tired to think, but as she drifted off to sleep, she realized that, for the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt useful in a way that went beyond mere survival. These men needed her, not just her skills but her presence, and there was a heady power in that realization. The weeks that followed established a rhythm that quickly became familiar. Amelia rose before dawn to start breakfast, feeding the ranch hands enormous meals designed to fuel a day of hard physical labor. She baked bread and pies, made stews and roasts, and experimented with the supplies available to create variety in the menu. The men responded with gratitude that bordered on worship, and more than one of them awkwardly offered to help with whatever she needed, clearly unused to having a woman on the ranch but eager to make her feel welcome. Quinton became a constant presence in her life, appearing in the kitchen to help with heavy lifting or to steal samples of whatever she was making. He told her stories about the ranch and the cattle and the land, and in return, Amelia found herself sharing pieces of her past that she had kept locked away for years. She told him about her parents, about the loneliness of the boarding house, about the small cruelties that had taught her to expect nothing from the world. "I used to dream about being different," she admitted one evening as they sat on her cabin porch watching the sun set over the snowy fields. "Smaller, prettier, more like the girls men wanted to court. I thought if I could just change myself enough, someone would finally see me as worth loving." "And now?" Quinton asked, his shoulder warm where it pressed against hers. "Now I think maybe I was looking for the wrong kind of seeing," Amelia said slowly. "You look at me like I am already enough, exactly as I am. I am still not sure I believe it, but I am starting to want to." "Believe it," Quinton said, his voice rough with emotion. "Amelia, you are more than enough. You are everything." He turned to face her, and in the fading light his eyes were dark and intense. "I know it has only been a few weeks. I know I should give you more time, let you settle in before I say anything. But I am not a patient man, and keeping this inside is killing me. I am falling in love with you. I think I started falling the moment you brought me that first cup of coffee in the boarding house, and every day since has just proven what I already knew in my bones." Amelia's breath caught, and she pressed a hand to her chest as though she could physically hold her racing heart. "Quinton, you cannot mean that." "I absolutely mean it," he said fiercely. "I mean it with everything I am. You walk into a room and it gets brighter. You smile and I forget what I was doing. You exist in this world and make it a better place just by being in it, and I cannot imagine going back to a life where I do not get to see you every day." "I am afraid," Amelia whispered. "I am afraid that you think you love me now, but one day you will wake up and realize you made a mistake, that you settled for someone who does not fit the picture of what a man like you should want." Quinton reached out and took her hands, holding them between his own larger palms. "Listen to me very carefully. I did not settle. I do not settle. I chose you, Amelia, with my eyes wide open and my heart fully engaged. Your size does not make you less lovable. If anything, it makes you more real, more present, more impossible to ignore. You take up space in the world, and you should, because the world is better with you in it. Do you understand what I am saying?" Tears spilled down Amelia's cheeks, hot against the cold evening air. "I want to believe you." "Then believe me," Quinton said, and he leaned forward to press his forehead against hers. "Believe me when I say that your heart makes you unforgettable, not your appearance, not your cooking, not anything else. You. The woman who hums while she works and gives away the best pieces of pie and worries about everyone except herself. That is who I love. That is who I will always love. Amelia closed the distance between them and kissed him, pouring all her fear and hope and desperate longing into the press of her lips against his. Quinton made a sound low in his throat and pulled her closer, one hand coming up to cup the back of her head as he deepened the kiss with a tenderness that made her chest ache. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Amelia rested her forehead against his shoulder and felt something inside her finally relax. "I think I am falling in love with you too," she admitted quietly. "It terrifies me, but I think it is true." "Then be terrified with me," Quinton said, wrapping his arms around her and holding her like she was something precious. "Be terrified and hopeful and uncertain and brave. Just be with me, Amelia. That is all I ask." January melted into February, and the harsh winter began to show signs of loosening its grip on the Oklahoma plains. The ranch came alive with activity as the men prepared for spring calving and the work that came with it, and Amelia found herself fully integrated into the rhythm of the place. She was no longer the new cook, but simply part of the fabric of daily life, and the men treated her with a combination of respect and affection that warmed her more than any stove. Her relationship with Quinton deepened in ways both profound and simple. They stole moments together whenever his work allowed, walking through the snowy fields or sitting by her fireplace in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing. He kissed her goodnight on her porch and held her hand when no one was watching and looked at her across the dining hall with eyes that said more than words ever could. But there were challenges too. Some of the ranch hands, particularly the younger ones, struggled with the idea of a woman in their midst, and there were occasional comments or looks that made Amelia's old insecurities flare up like embers stirred to life. Quinton dealt with such instances swiftly and firmly, making it clear that disrespect toward Amelia would not be tolerated, but the incident still left her shaken. "I do not want to cause problems," she told him one night after a particularly awkward encounter with a hand who had made a crude joke about her appearance. "Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe I should go back to Muskogee." "Maybe that man should find work elsewhere," Quinton said, his jaw tight with anger. "You are not causing problems, Amelia. Small-minded fools who cannot see past their own prejudices are causing problems, and I will not let them drive you away. You belong here, with me. With all of us who have enough sense to appreciate what we have." "It is hard," Amelia admitted. "Harder than I thought it would be. I thought maybe if I left the boarding house, if I went somewhere new, the judgments would not follow me. But they are everywhere, are they not? The assumptions about who I am and what I am worth based on how I look. They are everywhere because people are lazy thinkers," Quinton said bluntly. "They take shortcuts with their brains instead of doing the work of actually seeing another person. But you cannot let their laziness define your life, Amelia. You cannot shrink yourself down to make them comfortable. You are magnificent exactly as you are, and anyone who says otherwise can answer to me." His fierce defense made Amelia's heart swell with gratitude and love, and she pulled him close, burying her face in his chest. "What did I do to deserve you? You existed," Quinton said simply, his arms tight around her. "That is all you ever had to do." Spring arrived in earnest in March, bringing with it warming temperatures and the first brave shoots of green pushing through the thawing ground. The ranch exploded into frantic activity as calves were born and cattle were moved to fresh pastures, and Amelia's kitchen became the heart of the operation, fueling the men through 18-hour days with meals that sustained both body and spirit. It was during this time that Amelia met the ranch owner for the first time. Margaret Winters was a widow in her 60s who had inherited the property from her husband and ran it with an iron will and a sharp business mind. She arrived one morning in a practical riding outfit, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, and she surveyed Amelia with eyes that missed nothing. "So you are the miracle worker everyone keeps talking about," she said without preamble. "Quinton wrote that he had found us a proper cook, but I did not realize he meant he had found us a savior. The men have not looked this healthy in years. I just give them decent food," Amelia said, wiping her hands on her apron nervously. "Nothing miraculous about it." "Decent food, regular meals, and someone who cares whether they live or die," Margaret corrected. "That is more than miraculous out here, Miss Catherine. That is essential." She paused, her sharp eyes softening slightly. "I also hear that you and my foreman's best hand have formed an attachment." "Is that true?" Amelia felt her cheeks burn. "Quinton and I are, yes, we have an understanding." "Good," Margaret said briskly. "He is one of the best men I have, and he deserves someone who sees his worth. From what I can tell, you see each other's worth quite clearly. That is rare and valuable. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise." The unexpected validation from the formidable ranch owner left Amelia glowing for days, and when she told Quinton about the conversation, he laughed with delight. "Margaret does not give compliments lightly. If she approves of you, then you have truly arrived." As spring deepened into early summer, Amelia felt herself transforming in ways that went beyond the physical. She stood straighter, spoke with more confidence, met the eyes of others without automatically apologizing for her existence. The daily affirmation of being needed, of being valued, of being loved by a man who thought she hung the moon had worked a slow magic on her spirit, eroding years of accumulated hurt and replacing it with something that felt remarkably like self-worth. She still had moments of doubt, times when she caught a glimpse of herself in a mirror or saw other women in town, and felt the old familiar shame trying to claw its way back to the surface. But now she had Quinton's voice in her head, steady and sure, reminding her that her size did not define her value, that her body was just the vessel that carried her remarkable heart, that she was loved not in spite of who she was, but because of it. One evening in late May, Quinton took her on horseback to a ridge overlooking the ranch, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. They dismounted and stood side by side, his arm around her waist, and Amelia felt a sense of peace so profound it brought tears to her eyes. "I want to marry you," Quinton said quietly, his words carried on the warm breeze. "I know that is terribly unromantic, just stating it like that, but I am not good with flowery speeches. I just know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to wake up to your humming in the kitchen and fall asleep to your breathing beside me. I want to build a life with you, a real life full of ordinary days and extraordinary love. Will you marry me, Amelia Catherine? Will you take a chance on a cowboy who is certain beyond doubt that you are the best thing that ever happened to him?" Amelia turned to face him fully, her hands coming up to cup his face, feeling the familiar roughness of his stubble beneath her palms. "Yes," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you. I cannot believe this is real, that you are real, that I get to have this. But yes, absolutely yes." Quinton kissed her with a passion that stole her breath, his hands sliding around her waist to pull her flush against him, and Amelia kissed him back with every ounce of love and joy and relief she possessed. When they finally broke apart, both of them were smiling so wide it hurt, and the world around them seemed to shimmer with possibility. They were married in July in a simple ceremony at the small church in Muskogee, with Mrs. Henderson beaming in the front row and the ranch hands filling the remaining pews. Amelia wore a dress of soft blue cotton that she had sewn herself, and Quinton wore his best suit with his dark hair slicked back and his eyes shining with happiness. Tom Walker stood as witness, and even Margaret Winters made the trip to attend, her stern face softening into something almost tender as she watched them exchange vows. "I promise to love you through every season," Quinton said, his voice clear and steady as he held Amelia's hands in his own. "Winter and spring, summer and fall. I promise to see you, truly see you, every single day. I promise to remind you of your worth when you forget. I promise to be your partner, your friend, your safe place in the storm. And I promise that my love for you will never waver, never fade, never be anything less than absolute." Amelia's voice shook as she made her own vows. "I promise to trust you, even when fear tells me to pull away. I promise to let myself be loved, to accept that I am worthy of your devotion. I promise to fill our home with warmth and our life with laughter. I promise to be brave for us, to keep choosing hope over doubt. And I promise to love you with all that I am, for all the days we are given." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Quinton kissed her with tender reverence, and the small church erupted in applause and cheers. Amelia smiled against his lips and thought that happiness like this should be illegal, that surely no one person was meant to feel this much joy without consequence. They held a celebration at the ranch that evening, with tables set up in the yard and food enough to feed half the territory. Amelia had spent days preparing, with help from several women from town who had befriended her over the months, and the result was a feast that had people talking for weeks afterward. There was music and dancing, and though Amelia felt self-conscious at first, Quinton pulled her into his arms and whirled her around the makeshift dance floor with such enthusiasm that she forgot to worry about how she looked and simply let herself feel. "I love you," he murmured in her ear as they swayed together under the stars. "My wife, my beautiful, remarkable wife." "I love you too," Amelia said, resting her head on his shoulder. "My husband, my stubborn, wonderful husband who refused to let me hide." They spent their wedding night in the cabin with the blue door, which Quinton had spent weeks renovating and expanding to make it suitable for a married couple. He carried her over the threshold despite her protests that she was too heavy, and he set her down gently in the middle of the room that now held a larger bed and new curtains and a rocking chair by the fireplace. "Welcome home, Mrs. Zimmerman," he said, and the name sent a thrill through Amelia that made her dizzy. He undressed her slowly, reverently, and though Amelia felt her old fears trying to surface, trying to make her pull away and hide, Quinton's steady stream of praise and wonder kept them at bay. He touched her like she was something precious, kissed every inch of skin he revealed, and by the time he laid her down on the bed, Amelia was trembling not with anxiety but with desire. Their union was tender and sweet, and afterward, Amelia lay in Quinton's arms feeling like she had finally come home to a place she had not known she was searching for. He traced lazy patterns on her skin and told her she was beautiful, and for the first time in her life, Amelia believed it. The years that followed were not without challenges, but they were marked by a love that deepened with each passing season. Amelia continued to cook for the ranch, though as the operation grew, she gained help in the form of 2 younger women who learned at her elbow and eventually took over much of the daily work. This freed her to focus on other aspects of running the household, and she discovered a talent for organization and management that made her invaluable to Margaret Winters. Quinton rose through the ranks to become foreman when Tom retired, a position that came with more responsibility, but also more security. He and Amelia saved their money carefully, and in their 3rd year of marriage, They were able to purchase a small piece of land adjacent to the ranch where they built their own house. A modest but sturdy structure with a kitchen large enough for Amelia to experiment in and a porch where they could sit together in the evenings. Children came, though not as easily as they had hoped. Amelia suffered 2 heartbreaking losses before finally carrying a pregnancy to term, and in the spring of 1887, she delivered a healthy son they named James. He had Quinton's dark hair and Amelia's green eyes, and he was loved with a fierce intensity that sometimes frightened both his parents with its strength. 2 years later, a daughter arrived, smaller and more delicate than her brother, but with a will of iron that reminded everyone of her grandmother Margaret. They named her Sarah, and she quickly established herself as the ruler of the household despite being barely old enough to walk. Amelia threw herself into motherhood with the same dedication she had brought to cooking, and she discovered that the skills were not so different. Both required patience, attention, and the ability to know what was needed before it was asked for. She taught her children to be kind and brave, and to see people for who they truly were rather than how they appeared, and she hoped that the lessons would shield them from some of the pain she had experienced. Quinton was a devoted father, patient with James's endless questions and gentle with Sarah's dramatic moods. He came home each evening covered in dust and sweat, and he would sweep his children into his arms with a joy that never dimmed. And then he would find Amelia, wherever she was in the house, and he would kiss her like he still could not quite believe his good fortune. "I fall more in love with you every day," he told her one night as they sat on their porch watching the children chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. "I did not think that was possible, but here we are. We are lucky," Amelia said, her hand finding his in the space between their rocking chairs. "So very lucky." "Not luck," Quinton corrected gently. "Choice. We chose each other and we keep choosing each other every single day." "That is not luck, my love. That is commitment." As the children grew, Amelia watched them navigate the world with a confidence she had never possessed at their age, and she felt a fierce pride in knowing that she and Quinton had given them something she had lacked: the unshakable knowledge that they were loved exactly as they were. James grew tall and serious, interested in the workings of the ranch and eager to learn from his father. Sarah remained spirited and bold, unafraid to speak her mind and certain of her place in the world. There were difficult times too. The ranch faced challenges from weather and markets and the changing world, and there were seasons when money was tight and worry kept Amelia awake at night. But through it all, Quinton remained steady, his love a constant anchor that kept her grounded when fear threatened to sweep her away. In the winter of 1895, 12 years after that first blizzard that had brought them together, another storm descended on Oklahoma with similar fury. Amelia stood at the window of their house watching the snow fall in thick curtains, and she felt Quinton's arms slide around her waist from behind. "Remembering?" he asked softly, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Remembering," Amelia confirmed. "Thinking about the woman I was then, standing in Mrs. Henderson's kitchen, convinced that no one would ever want her. I barely recognize that person anymore." "She is still in there," Quinton said. "The parts of her that were worth keeping. But she has grown into someone even more remarkable, someone who knows her own strength, someone who has learned to accept love without questioning it." Amelia turned in his arms to face him, noting the silver beginning to thread through his dark hair, the lines around his eyes that came from years of squinting against the sun. He was 40 now, and she was 35, and they had built a life together that exceeded anything she had dared to dream. "Your heart makes you unforgettable," Quinton said, echoing the words he had spoken to her so long ago. That was true in the boarding house kitchen, and it is true now, and it will be true when we are old and gray and sitting on this porch watching our grandchildren play. Nothing about you is forgettable, Amelia. Everything about you is etched into my soul." Amelia kissed him then, pouring a decade of gratitude and love and joy into the connection, and when they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his and smiled. "I think that blizzard was the best thing that ever happened to me. To both of us," Quinton corrected. "To both of us, my love." The years continued their steady march, bringing changes both expected and surprising. Margaret Winters passed away in her sleep in 1899, leaving the ranch to a nephew, but ensuring that Quinton and Amelia's position remained secure through generous terms in her will. The nephew proved to be as capable as his aunt, and the ranch continued to thrive under his management. James grew into a young man of 20 and announced his intention to marry the daughter of a neighboring rancher, a sensible girl named Emma who loved him with a straightforward devotion that reminded Amelia of her own relationship with Quinton. The wedding was held in the summer of 1907, and as Amelia watched her son exchange vows, she cried tears of joy and nostalgia, remembering her own wedding day and marveling at how quickly time had passed. Sarah proved more stubborn about matrimony, declaring that she had no intention of marrying anyone who did not meet her exacting standards. She was 23 and working as a teacher in Muskogee, living independently in a small apartment and scandalizing the more traditional members of the community with her modern ideas. Amelia worried about her daughter's happiness, but also admired her fierce independence, recognizing in Sarah a strength that Amelia had had to fight for, but that Sarah had been born possessing. By 1910, Amelia and Quinton were grandparents twice over, with James and Emma producing a rambunctious grandson and a quieter granddaughter who followed her grandmother Amelia everywhere, watching with solemn eyes as she baked and cooked and managed the household. Amelia taught the little girl, named Catherine after Amelia's middle name, the same recipes her own mother had taught her, and she felt the beautiful continuity of it, the way love and knowledge and tradition passed from generation to generation. Quinton was 54 now and still working the ranch, though he had begun training younger men to take over the more physically demanding aspects of his job. His hair was more silver than dark, and he moved with the careful deliberation of someone whose body reminded him daily that he was no longer young. But his eyes still lit up when Amelia entered a room, and he still kissed her good night every evening with the same tender devotion he had shown on their wedding night. They had survived loss and hardship, celebrated triumphs and weathered disappointments, and through it all, their love had remained the central truth of their lives. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Quinton took Amelia back to the ridge where he had proposed, and they stood together looking out over land that had become as familiar as their own heartbeats. "I would do it all again," Quinton said, his arm around her shoulders. "Every single day, every single moment. I would choose you over and over in every lifetime, in every version of the world. You are my greatest adventure, Amelia Zimmerman. You are my home." Amelia leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body against hers, and she thought about the girl she had been in that boarding house kitchen so long ago. That girl who had believed herself unworthy of love, who had shrunk from the world and expected nothing but dismissal. She wanted to tell that girl that everything would be okay, that the pain would not last forever, that love was waiting just around the corner in the form of a snow-covered cowboy with honest eyes and a generous heart. "I love you," she said simply, because after 25 years some truths needed no embellishment. "I love you with everything I am and everything I will ever be." "I know," Quinton said, pressing a kiss to her temple, "and I love you the same way, always have, Always will. They stood together as the sun set, painting the Oklahoma sky in shades of amber and rose, and Amelia felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. Her body was older now, softer in some places and harder in others, marked by years of work and childbirth and life. But she no longer saw it as a source of shame. It was simply the vessel that carried her through the world, and it had served her well. More importantly, it was loved. Not in spite of anything, not with qualifications or conditions, but wholly and completely. Quinton had taught her that, had shown her through 25 years of unwavering devotion that she was worthy exactly as she was. And in learning to accept his love, she had finally learned to love herself. The winter of 1912 brought another fierce storm to Oklahoma, and as Amelia watched the snow fall from the window of the house she and Quinton had built together, she smiled at the symmetry of it. Nearly 30 years had passed since that first blizzard, 30 years of love and growth and becoming. She was 52 years old now, her hair streaked with gray and her body bearing the marks of a life well lived, and she had never been more content. Quinton found her at the window and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, his movements automatic and tender. "You are going to catch cold standing here in the draft." "I am remembering," Amelia said, leaning back against him. "All of it, everything that brought us here." "Good memories?" Quinton asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "The best memories," Amelia confirmed. "A life I never imagined I could have. Love I did not think existed for someone like me. And the knowledge that I was wrong about so many things, but right about the one thing that mattered most." "What is that?" Quinton asked, his arms tightening around her. "That you were worth taking a chance on," Amelia said. "That stepping out of my comfort zone and onto that wagon and into this life was the bravest, best thing I ever did. That love, real love, is worth every moment of fear it takes to reach for it." They stood together watching the storm, and Amelia thought about all the versions of herself she had been over the years. The frightened girl in the boarding house, the nervous woman arriving at the ranch, the bride in the blue dress, the mother holding her newborn son, the grandmother teaching her namesake to make pie crust. All of them were her, layers of experience and growth that had built the person she had become. And through every transformation, Quinton had been there, steady and sure, seeing her completely and loving her unconditionally. He had been right all those years ago when he said her heart made her unforgettable. Not because her heart was particularly special, but because he had chosen to remember it, to value it, to treasure it as the most important thing about her. That was the gift he had given her, more precious than any jewel or title or fortune. He had given her the gift of being seen, of being known, of being loved for exactly who she was. And in return, she had given him the same, creating a partnership built on mutual respect and unwavering devotion. As the years continued their steady progression, Amelia and Quinton settled into the comfortable rhythm of a long marriage. They knew each other's moods and habits, could communicate with a glance or a touch, moved through their days with the synchronized ease of two people who had become one unit without losing their individual selves. They argued occasionally, as all couples did, but their disagreements were brief and quickly resolved, tempered by the knowledge that nothing was worth risking the connection they had built. Sarah finally married at 28, choosing a doctor from Fort Smith who matched her in both intelligence and stubbornness. The wedding was a livelier affair than James's had been, full of music and laughter and Sarah's characteristic flair for drama. Amelia watched her daughter dance with her new husband and felt a bittersweet pang of recognition, seeing in Sarah's face the same mix of joy and terror she had felt on her own wedding day. "She will be fine," Quinton assured her, reading her expression with the ease of long practice. She is strong, our daughter, and she chose well. He adores her." "I know," Amelia said. "I just want her to be happy. I want both of them to have what we have." "Then we show them," Quinton said simply. "We keep living our love, keep being an example, keep proving that it is possible. That is the best gift we can give them." By 1920, Amelia and Quinton were in their 60s, officially old by any standard, though Quinton still worked part-time at the ranch, and Amelia still kept house with the same efficiency she always had, albeit at a slower pace. They had 7 grandchildren now, ranging in age from 13 to 2, and the house was frequently full of noise and chaos as the various branches of the family gathered for meals and celebrations. Amelia loved these times, loved seeing her home filled with the evidence of the life she and Quinton had created together. She baked cookies with the grandchildren and told them stories about their parents as children, and she watched Quinton teach the older boys how to rope and ride with a patience that made her heart swell with love. On quiet evenings, when it was just the two of them again, they would sit on their porch and watch the sun set over the familiar landscape, holding hands in the gathering darkness. They spoke less than they used to, not because they had nothing to say, but because they had learned the value of comfortable silence, of simply being together without the need to fill every moment with words. "I am grateful," Amelia said one such evening, her voice soft in the twilight. "For all of it. For you, for our children, for this life. I know it is maudlin to say, but I do not want to leave this world without telling you one more time how grateful I am that you saw me in that boarding house kitchen, that you refused to let me hide, that you loved me into being the person I was always meant to be." Quinton turned to look at her, his weathered face softening with emotion. "You were always that person. I just helped you remember it, and I am the one who should be grateful, Amelia. You made my life richer and fuller and more meaningful than I ever dreamed possible. Every day with you has been a gift." They kissed then, a soft brush of lips that still carried echoes of the passion they had shared in younger days, and Amelia rested her head on Quinton's shoulder as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. She thought about the concept of forever, about the years they had already shared and the unknown number that stretched ahead of them, and she felt a profound sense of completion. Whatever time they had left, whether it was months or years or decades, she would spend it exactly like this. Beside the man who had taught her how to be loved, who had seen past her sighs and her fears to the heart that beat beneath. The man who had proven, day after day for nearly 40 years, that she was unforgettable, that she mattered, that she was worthy of every good thing life had to offer. "I love you," she whispered into the growing darkness. "More than words can say, more than I knew it was possible to love another person. Thank you for being my home, Quinton Zimmerman. Thank you for being my always." "And you are mine," Quinton replied, his voice rough with emotion. "My home, my heart, my always. From that first blizzard to this moment and every moment beyond. You and me, Amelia, forever." They sat together as the night deepened around them. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the raw materials of honesty and courage and unwavering love. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human struggles and triumphs, but Amelia barely noticed them. She had everything she needed right here, in the warmth of Quinton's hand in hers, in the steady rhythm of his breathing, in the knowledge that she was loved completely and would be until her last breath. The story of how a frightened woman in a boarding house kitchen became a beloved wife, mother, and grandmother was not a fairy tale. It was messy and real, full of doubt and fear and moments of genuine struggle. But it was also a testament to the transformative power of being seen, of being chosen, of accepting love when it was offered even though every instinct screamed to pull away. Amelia had learned that her size was just one aspect of who she was, no more defining than the color of her hair or the sound of her voice. Her body had carried her through life, had borne children and worked hard and endured, and it deserved respect and care, not shame. But more than that, she had learned that the right person would see past surface appearances to the qualities that truly mattered: kindness, courage, loyalty, love. Quinton had been that person for her, and she had been that person for him. They had saved each other in countless small ways over the years, building a partnership that sustained them through every challenge. And now, in the autumn of their lives, they could look back on nearly 4 decades together and know that they had lived well, loved deeply, and left a legacy that would continue in their children and grandchildren. As winter approached once more, Amelia found herself thinking often about that long-ago December when a cowboy had stumbled into her life and refused to stumble back out. She thought about the girl she had been, so convinced of her own unworthiness, and she wished she could reach back through time to tell that girl that everything would be okay, that love was coming, that happiness was possible. But perhaps that was the point. Perhaps everyone had to walk their own path through doubt and pain to reach the other side. Perhaps the journey was as important as the destination, teaching lessons that could not be learned any other way. Amelia had learned to value herself, to see her own worth, to accept love without constantly questioning whether she deserved it. Those were hard-won lessons, forged in the fires of experience, and they had made her who she was. On Christmas Eve of 1920, the entire family gathered at Amelia and Quinton's house for dinner, a chaotic affair with children running everywhere and adults trying to catch up on each other's lives, and Amelia's kitchen, producing a feast that would have made her 23-year-old self proud. As she watched her family laugh and eat and simply be together, Amelia felt a swell of emotion so intense it brought tears to her eyes. Quinton noticed immediately, as he always did, and he crossed the room to her side. "What is wrong?" "Nothing," Amelia said, wiping at her eyes. "Everything is right. So wonderfully, perfectly right. Look at this, Quinton. Look at what we built." He looked, his own eyes growing misty as he took in the scene. Their children now grown with families of their own, their grandchildren playing together with the easy camaraderie of cousins who genuinely liked each other. The house filled with warmth and love and the smell of good food. "We did well," he said simply. "We did," Amelia agreed. "Better than I ever dreamed possible." Later, after the children had been put to bed in various rooms throughout the house and the adults had retired to the parlor for quiet conversation, Quinton raised his glass in a toast. "To family," he said, "to love, to the journey that brought us all together, and especially to my wife who has made every day of my life better simply by being in it. I love you, Amelia. Merry Christmas." The family echoed the sentiment, and Amelia felt her heart might burst from the fullness of it. She looked around at these people, this beautiful, complicated, wonderful family that existed because a cowboy had once walked into a boarding house during a blizzard and seen a woman that everyone else overlooked. She thought about all the moments of doubt and fear she had experienced over the years, all the times she had almost pulled away or given up, or convinced herself that this could not be real. And she thought about how glad she was that she had chosen courage over fear, hope over despair, love over loneliness. That choice, made in a kitchen surrounded by flour and cinnamon all those years ago, had led to this moment, to this life, to this overwhelming sense of belonging and purpose and joy. As the evening wound down and people began preparing for bed, Amelia and Quinton stood together on their porch one last time, looking out at the snow that had begun to fall in soft, white drifts. It was nearly 40 years to the day since they had met, and the symmetry of it felt fitting, as though the universe itself was acknowledging their story. "Thank you," Amelia said softly, "for everything, for seeing me, for loving me, for building this life with me. I do not have adequate words for what it has meant." "You do not need words," Quinton said, pulling her close. "I know, I have always known. Your heart tells me everything I need to hear." They stood together in the falling snow, two people who had grown old together, but had never lost the essential connection that had formed in a moment of crisis and grown stronger with each passing year. And as Amelia rested her head on Quinton's shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her cheek, she understood with perfect clarity that this was what happily ever after actually looked like. It was not a fairy tale ending where everything froze in a perfect moment. It was the steady accumulation of days and years, of challenges met and overcome, of love tested and proven true. It was waking up beside the same person for decades and still finding new things to appreciate about them. It was building a family and a home and a life that mattered, that made a difference, that left the world a better place than you found it. It was choosing, every single day, to love and be loved, to see and be seen, to honor your partner's heart and trust them with your own. That was the real magic, the real miracle. Not the dramatic gestures or the sweeping romance, but the quiet daily decision to show up, to try, to care, to stay. Amelia had learned that lesson slowly, fighting against years of conditioning that told her she was not worthy of such devotion. But she had learned it, internalized it, made it the foundation of her life. And in doing so, she had discovered that she was not unlovable, had never been unlovable, that the only thing holding her back was her own belief in the lies others had told her. Quinton had given her the truth, had lived the truth every day for nearly 40 years. And the truth was simple. Her heart made her unforgettable. Her kindness, her strength, her capacity for love and loyalty and fierce devotion, those were the things that mattered. Those were the things that lasted. Those were the things that built a life worth living. As they finally went inside, shaking snow from their clothes and moving toward the warmth of their bedroom, Amelia took one last look at the gathered family sleeping throughout her house. She saw her legacy written in their faces, in the way James held his wife's hand even in sleep, in the way Sarah's husband watched over their children with protective tenderness, in the way the grandchildren had all wanted to sleep in piles together rather than separately. She had taught them, through her example and Quinton's, what real love looked like. She had shown them that worth was not determined by appearance, that value came from character, that the heart was always the most important thing. And they had absorbed those lessons, would carry them forward into their own lives and relationships, would pass them on to future generations. That was the happy ending, Amelia realized as she climbed into bed beside her husband of 37 years. Not a moment frozen in time, but a ripple effect that would continue long after she and Quinton were gone. The love they had built would echo forward through time, influencing people they would never meet, shaping a future they would not live to see. Quinton pulled her close, his body warm and familiar against hers, and Amelia closed her eyes with a smile on her face. She had been so afraid, that girl in the boarding house kitchen, so certain that she would spend her life alone, unloved, unseen. And she had been so wonderfully, beautifully wrong. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness, knowing Quinton was already halfway to sleep but needing to say the words one more time. "I love you too," he murmured back, his arm tightening around her waist. "Always have, always will, my unforgettable Amelia, my heart, my home, my everything." and as sleep claimed them both, Amelia's last conscious thought was one of profound gratitude for the blizzard that had brought them together, for the courage she had found to take a chance, for the cowboy who had refused to let her hide, and for every single moment of the life they had built together. It had been a good life, a rich life, a life full of love and meaning and purpose, and if she could go back and tell that frightened 23-year-old girl anything, it would be this: hold on, be brave, say yes when the cowboy asks you to come with him. Because on the other side of that fear is a love so deep and true and lasting that it will transform everything you thought you knew about yourself and the world. Your size does not make you unlovable. Your heart makes you unforgettable. Remember that, trust that, live that. And watch as the universe unfolds into something more beautiful than you ever imagined possible. The snow continued to fall outside, blanketing the world in white, and inside the house that love had built, two people slept peacefully in each other's arms, their story complete and perfect and wholly their own. A story of a blizzard and a boarding house, of courage and choice, of seeing and being seen, of love that conquered doubt and built something lasting. A story with a happy ending that was not really an ending at all, but a beginning that continued to unfold with each new day, each new generation, each new heart touched by the truth that everyone deserves to be loved exactly as they are. That was Amelia and Quinton's legacy, their gift to the world, their proof that love, real love, was always worth the risk. And in the quiet of that Christmas night, surrounded by family and wrapped in the warmth of decades of devotion, that truth shone brighter than any star, as unforgettable as the woman whose heart had started it all.